So this is where I ended up. Still got a lot of coverage, but I've just kind of accepted that that's what my particular composition is going to look like. It was all about the lively experimental mark making, and I just wanted to kind of show you what I did really. So I took a small palette knife and I mixed some of that autumn yellow and also some of this colour, which is cadmium red hue, which is number 504. And I just very sort of loosely loaded the palette knife and then just kind of scratched and kind of made these kind of gestures in the foreground to create layering, so we've got contrast of colour, because reds and greens are opposite on the colour wheel, and whenever we work with opposites we create contrast. Something else you might want to experiment with, if you have an old loyalty card or a credit card or something, you can always use those as paint scrapers, so that can be fun to just create texture and put really sort of loose areas of colour down. You can also use these, which you get with canvases. They're canvas stretcher bars. Great for just messing around and putting texture in. The other thing I did was I just sort of used the edge of the brush and dipped it into very thick paint and then kind of stamped on top to create these areas here where we've got more of the texture going on. And really, as I say, it's just a question of carrying on and just experimenting and really sort of painting by feel, so that you're putting lots of kind of different marks and textures and things in there. So if you notice, I've got the original reference picture here. Let's move that. And you can see they're quite different, because this is kind of made in another artist's style. This isn't my reference picture, this is a different artist. And it's just very different in terms of the mark making. This is kind of where I ended up with it, because my feel is very different. It's a bit like trying to copy somebody else's handwriting. So if I looked at somebody else's handwriting and I tried to copy it, lots of me would come out into it, my regular movements would come out into it. And you almost develop a vocabulary of mark making when you start to create things, and you'll notice that your kind of way of moving, whether you move a lot from the shoulder and you're very gestural, whether you use your elbow, or whether you just kind of keep your hand very close into your body and make small movements, you will notice that you have a natural style and a natural tendency. And if your natural tendency is to be very small like this, you want to be more gestural and kind of work more with your movement. So there's a lot going on in this lesson. You know, we covered some of the fundamentals of acrylic, we looked at texture, we looked at contrast, we looked at layering, we looked at changing composition. There's a lot that we covered, and it's certainly something that you can go back and do again if you wish. You might want to do it with a different kind of picture or a different scene. Yeah, just play and experiment really. But I mean, this kind of texture that we created in the foreground is lovely, because there's so much going on there and there's so many different types of brush mark. When you work like this, what you'll do is you'll start to develop your mark making and your brushwork. So it's really interesting to just grab your brushes and see how you respond to them, particularly if you don't paint a lot or it's not something you've done before, because what you want to do is to start noticing how you work and notice what your responses are to particular things, because that way you'll understand what your natural tendencies are and you'll know what to do to almost counteract it. So as I was saying, if you work in quite a small kind of tight style and we're working very loose, you'll need to encourage yourself to be more gestural, to use larger brushes, to not worry about detail. Whereas if you're the other way around and you tend to be very, very loose, and we do a different exercise where it calls for things to be quite tight and quite restrictive, you might have to rein in your natural tendencies. But we're all different, and it all depends on our physicality and our attitude and our personality and lots of different things. So I hope you enjoyed that lesson. It's something a bit different. Like I say, plenty covered. and I would love to see your work, so do post your work in the gallery.